Hi, everybody. This is David Nevins for Citybiz List. And today we continue a series of conversations that we've been having on behalf of an organization called the Bridge Alliance. And the theme of our conversations is repairing America's broken democracy. So we have a little bit of work to do in that regard. And if you were to go to the Bridge Alliance website, there's a terrific line early on that says, in terms of what the Bridge Alliance does, their job is to attempt to fix the dysfunctional and suffocating partisanship of our current political system. So most of us agree that that exists, and most of us agree that that would be quite something if we're capable of fixing it. In any event, toward that end, our guest today is Brad Fitch, President and CEO of the Congressional Management Foundation. Despite the success of the Congressional Management Foundation, I'm going to guess that most of our viewers are not familiar with it. So, Brad, welcome to our program. I know you've had quite a distinguished 25-year career in Washington primarily, but tell us a little bit, Brad, about yourself and about the work of the Congressional Management Foundation.
Thank you, David. Well, I'm like a lot of people who came to Washington. I wasn't from here. I came here on an 8th grade school trip on a rickety bus from a small town in rural New York, and felt the energy of being in Washington, and kind of decided then this is where I wanted to make my career. So I was able to go to graduate school here and then work in the Congress for 13 years, and on and off now with the Congressional Management Foundation for 15 years. And I'm just delighted to be part of the Congress. I've actually been part of it for over 35 years now, sometimes as a reporter, sometimes as a consultant and a vendor, but always affiliated around the United States Congress. I'm just a believer in the institution and want to help make it stronger. So,
Brad, I know that I think one of your objectives or part of your mission is to, as I read, to help build citizen trust in Congress. And I think it's fair to say, that's something that there's not a ton of right now. So, talk to us about how you're going about that. And again, the work of the Congressional Management Foundation and what you hope to achieve.
Well, the Congressional Management Foundation has twin missions. We are like the small business consultants for Congress. So we help individual offices and individual members of Congress improve how they interact with citizens, everything from better websites to how to do a strategic plan. But we also work with citizen advocates, primarily through associations and nonprofits, to help them have a better understanding and relationship with the U.S. Congress. Our theory of change is if we have a better Congress and we have a more engaged citizenry, we'll have a better democracy.
Yeah, I mean, I think most people think that's true, but there's been so much partisanship. So there's such a partisan divide. I know in a previous conversation, we were talking about the fact that, how is it possible, it doesn't matter whether you're Democrat or Republican, but how is it possible to vote, 90+% of the time with your party, as if the other ideas are just always wrong, no matter which party you're a part of.
Well, it is a challenge, I know, for a lot of people to see something positive coming out of Washington these days, because most of what the news covers is bad news. And I can certainly report that the fumes of January 6th, rather, are still heavy in the air in our nation's capital. And I can tell you that as part of the congressional community, it's still hurting. And the divisions that were exposed in horrid ways on that day on January 6th are still very much present. So we've got a long way to go to heal those wounds. But it's important to note that there are people out there that are trying to build a better democracy. And I've just been really encouraged by the Bridge Alliance and other groups that have been investing in trying to improve both the democratic dialogue, the election system, our journalism system. I started at the Congressional Management Foundation in 2001. And if you ask me how many groups were trying to improve the Congress, we couldn't put together a poker game Well, we can field a softball league now. There are just dozens of organizations that are trying to improve it. Everything from trying to get millennials to work together who are elected officials through the Millennial Action Project. Former members of Congress are very involved through the FMC, the Former Members of Congress Association. It's just an incredible array of groups that are trying to improve the democracy. And what most Americans don't see is that there is some collaboration. There is bipartisanship happening behind the scenes. We may not recall, but just a couple of months ago, the relief bill that passed at the end of the year was passed with overwhelming bipartisan support in the United States Congress, providing tons of aid to the United States Congress. And if you look back even the last 10 years, there have been bipartisan compromises. People don't remember that they were bipartisan. They don't see that it was really the centrist groups that were coming together to solve problems. That doesn't mean there's not a ton of difficulties and challenges that this nation doesn't face that the Congress needs to address. But there actually are collaborations and groups within the Congress that do work together.
Brad, I was particularly interested in your introduction with regard to the work you do. I guess you'd call yourselves consultants to congressional offices. And I know, people call their congressional office, their congressperson's office all the time. Even if it's mistakenly to get a pothole, repaired on their street. Talk a little bit. I don't think too many people know about this. So you help a congressperson's office with what exactly, and how do you go about that?
Well, most people don't realize that Congress is made up of 535 small businesses, and they have an incredible amount of independence on how they run their operation. And they really were tested in the last 12 months because when we had the first break of COVID and coronavirus in March, members of Congress were getting creative to get protective gear to their constituents into hospitals. Then it was ventilators. Then it was mismanagement and problems with the Paycheck Protection Program. Then it was unemployment insurance. Now it's vaccinations. And believe it or not, congressional offices are the customer service hubs for many of these governmental services and have done more work in what's called casework, but basically they're acting as an ombudsman for citizens, for small businesses. And you know what? It didn't matter in April or May of 2020 whether you're a Democrat or Republican. We all know this virus doesn't have political bents. And these members of Congress helped people of all political ilk. And we're just collecting some stories right now to do some research on the amazing work that the legislative branch did to provide direct services. I like to call it's the retail level of government where they are providing direct services to their constituents. So
I think you would probably agree. Many Americans are frustrated with what they see as the workings of Congress and so forth. And yet, I know a number of congressional representatives. You probably know all of them, but tell us, how do we get to this divide, and what can be done to fix it? I know that my friends in Congress, they work so hard, but yet not too many folks appreciate the outcome of their efforts, let's just say.
Well, a lot of people don't see the outcome of their effort, and that's a challenge. There was a study done by the Pew Research Center some years ago, and the cottage industry that I got started in, which was covering Capitol Hill for small TV stations around the South, that industry's gone away, and there are no more than about 25 states don't even have a reporter in the state covering Capitol Hill. So you're following a formula in the media of all heat and no light, and that's what Congress gets covered. It's the showboats, not the workhorses, that get covered. Only 1 out of 10 members of Congress will get on a Sunday show in any given year. Well, what are the other 9 out of 10 doing? Well, a lot of them are working for their constituents. They're dedicated public servants. They may have disagreements with the other side, but they do look for ways to try to work together to solve problems. And I think you will see that in this Congress. There is a requirement in the Senate generally, most of the time, to have some kind of bipartisanship in order to get something accomplished in the Senate. And I think you'll see it over time. But the broader question is, what can we do in the long run? And I think one of the things that Americans can do is diversify their news consumption. There is a great deal of research that's being done on how Congress is just really a reflection of America. And if you're a Fox News watcher and you never turn on CNN or CNBC or vice versa, you're going to have a skewed view of the world. And I have a very bipartisan news diet and find it fascinating the differences that we're seeing in news coverage coming there. So that's one thing that citizens can do. They also can engage their lawmakers in a constructive way. And this is often done through a nonprofit or association you belong to. So if you're with the Chamber of Commerce, or you believe in food banks and you want to be a volunteer for food banks, or you believe in the environment, you want to help the Sierra Club, it's okay to get involved. In fact, members of Congress want to hear from those dedicated, interested citizens in their constituencies so they're better informed about the decisions that they make.
You hit on something that we've been talking to others. It seems to be a common theme, and yet it's not very often done on the part of the public. Diversifying your news consumption. So when I was a kid, there were a handful of television stations, and of course the internet didn't exist. So if you were CBS, NBC, and ABC, you kind of had to play to the middle, and because otherwise you needed to have 33% of the audience in order to make any money and be successful. So here we are many years later with scores of cable channels, and now they're able to be successful with 3% or 5% of the audience, and yet so because of that, they don't have to play to the middle. They can play to one side or the other. And many Americans become addicted to, their favorite channel. And thus, as you noted, Brad, they're not getting a diversified presentation. Do you have any thoughts on what we can do about that?
Well, one of the things we're trying to do at the Congressional Management Foundation is test some theories on whether we can do something at the retail level. So one of the projects we're working on involves online or virtual town hall meetings. Now, there's a lot of advantages to virtual town hall meetings. I know people wax poetically about the old-fashioned in-person town hall meetings, and I went to dozens of them when I worked on Capitol Hill. But the reality is 40 or 50 people are going to go to an in-person town hall meeting at best. And you might get one soundbite or line in the local paper. It's not a real robust conversation with the constituency. But a virtual town hall meeting could have 10,000 people for a member of the House of Representatives. We did a bipartisan one in Oklahoma last year talking about coronavirus with a Democrat and Republican, and we had 7,000 people there, and we were brought on medical experts to talk about the value of wearing masks and social distancing, and it was an amazing experience. So we're going to try to see if we can continue to do that and bridge the divide, bring on people who perhaps may not agree with the member of Congress. And believe it or not, members of Congress actually do want to talk to the other side. And part of it is ego. They do think they can win them over if they just have 5 minutes, and they want to be loved by everyone. I mean, I love my Congress, but they've got pretty big egos. One member of Congress said she thought members of Congress were still middle children trying to please their father. And so they have this innate desire to say yes and to win you over. And so they know, and remember, half of them are lawyers. So persuasion is in their DNA. So we're wondering if we can bring together some open-minded members of Congress and some constituents that may not agree with them for a robust dialogue. It also has the advantage, and I have to be very blunt about this, it's a safe space for members. They don't have to worry about security. And I don't know if you've noticed what's going on around the Capitol right now, but it looks like a minimum security prison with barbed wire at the top of 12-foot fences. And so the concern is real. We're getting more death threats to Congress than at any time in American history. So we have to find safe spaces, both safe from a psychological standpoint, but also from a physical standpoint, to have lawmakers engage with their constituents in a constructive dialogue. And increasingly, that's going to be a big part of the Congressional Management Foundation's mission, because we believe that we are at that nexus between citizens and Congress and can be a bridge ourselves to help create a better understanding between the two sides of our democratic dialogue.
Yeah, I hope you're right about that. It seems, and I don't know whether it's the result of gerrymandering or what have you, but it does seem like too many members of Congress don't really need to listen to the other side, right? That their districts are safe, provided they have the right positions and say the right things to 50+% of their constituents. And then I think that applies to all of us, really, as well. We all have friends, and you say to one another, is there anything I can say to you that would convince you that I'm right about this, or you're wrong about that? And the answer typically is no. I don't think that's very likely. So it does seem, Brad, to the extent that you at CMF can be promoting and hosting these virtual town meetings. There might be, we have to have a lot of them, of course, but in the end, it seems like there might be a real solution to our being able to talk and listen to one another in that regard.
And I would add, our research actually shows that most citizens would be satisfied with their member of Congress, even if they voted against their wishes, with a big if they felt their voice was heard, if they felt the member took into consideration their voice. We're releasing a major report this week on the future of citizen engagement. And we did take a national poll of about 3,000 voters and asked them that question. And basically the two caveats they said, I'd be okay if my member of Congress voted against my wishes, if I felt my voice was heard and I knew they were doing it free of special interest, that they were doing what they thought was in the best interest of the district. Now, that's a challenge, right? You got to get members to change their communication styles, to communicate to the voters, I'm listening instead of I'm right. Right. And again, politicians sometimes want to convince you that they're right. And as you pointed out, David, we're even learning about neuroscience of our brain chemicals, that we're hardwired sometimes to look for reinforcing data to reinforce our pre-existing views. And so Congress shouldn't be looking to try to convince people that they're wrong, but to convince people that their voice is heard. And that's going to be a big part of our mission and projects moving forward.
Yeah, very important. And I definitely think you're on the right track. Brad, how can our viewers learn more about the terrific work of the Congressional Management Foundation?
Well, please come to our website, congressfoundation.org, and you can poke around and see some of our terrific research that we've done with congressional offices. We actually created a few years ago a Citizen Resource Center. So if you want to get involved, just type Citizen Resource Center and CMF, and you'll come to that, and there'll be articles and reports on how Congress really works, on how to set up meetings with members of Congress, and other important, valuable data to make you a better citizen advocate.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Brad, did I fail to ask you something that you wanted to share?
No, I think you covered the waterfront. Thanks, David.
Yeah, no, it's I wasn't honestly familiar with the organization prior to this interview, or I guess I should say prior to preparing for this interview. But I'm fascinated with your work, and I wish you much success going forward.
Thank you. Yeah, Philanthropy Journal called us the most influential nonprofit you've never heard of. Something my fundraising consultants really don't like that much. But yeah, we are part of our challenges. And I think that's why Bridge Alliance is so great, is to get known outside the Beltway. One thing I didn't mention, but we don't have to cover it, is we've created a new awards program, kind of like the Oscars for Congress, called the Democracy Awards. And one of the ways we're hoping to change Congress for the better is to create standards for transparency and accountability, or constituent service, and give them an award if they do well. They are competitive beasts on Capitol Hill, and we're hopeful. We've already seen change start to happen. A freshman lawmaker came in from Pennsylvania 2 years ago and said, in my second year, I'm going to win a Democracy Award for Transparency and Accountability. And she changed her practices. She made sure that she was open, providing her schedule to her constituents, all sorts of information. And heck, if she didn't win the award in her freshman term, first freshman ever winning an award from us. So
that's terrific. That's great. Well, I'm in the marketing and communications PR business, and I tell all my clients, you don't really want to be America's best kept secret. You want to be better known in that regard. It strikes me, Brad, given the wonderful work that you're doing, that better recognition will soon follow. So thanks for joining us today, for sure.
And thanks for the PR. We appreciate getting the word out to through Citybiz.
Absolutely. So we've been chatting today with Brad Fitch, and on behalf of the Bridge Alliance and on behalf of our conversations regarding repairing America's broken democracy, good work, Brad. And this is David Nevins for Citybiz List. Thank you for joining us.